Hello, and welcome to KeyLang Daily News for January 3, 2026. I'm bringing you 20 stories from around the world today. Let's begin with our top story. News 1. Trump threatens military intervention over Iran protests. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Iran that America would intervene to rescue protesters if authorities continue violent crackdowns. At least 7 people have died in mass demonstrations over economic hardships as Iran's currency collapsed. Iranian officials responded that U.S. intervention would destabilize the entire region and threaten American interests. News 2. UAE-backed forces announce independence referendum for southern Yemen. The Southern Transitional Council declared a 2-year transition period leading to an independence referendum for southern Yemen. The announcement came amid deadly fighting with Saudi-backed forces. STC leaders warned they would declare immediate independence if attacked or if dialogue attempts fail. News 3. Venezuela's Maduro calls for talks with Trump, warns against military action. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro urged Donald Trump to abandon what he called illegal warmongering and begin serious negotiations. Maduro warned of a forever war similar to Iraq following reports of a U.S. airstrike on Venezuelan territory. The Venezuelan leader declined to confirm details of the alleged attack. News 4. 6.5 magnitude earthquake kills 1 in Mexico. A powerful earthquake struck near Acapulco, Mexico, killing at least 1 person and injuring 12 others. The tremor was felt 400 kilometers away in Mexico City, where emergency alarms sent residents into the streets. A 60-year-old man died from his injuries, but no serious structural damage was reported. News 5. Ukraine appoints spy chief as presidential office head. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky named military intelligence chief Kyrylo Budanov to head his presidential office. Budanov has led the HER intelligence agency, which claimed responsibility for several effective strikes against Russian targets. The appointment comes as Ukraine continues its defense against the Russian invasion. News 6. Champagne sparklers blamed for Swiss bar fire that killed 40. Investigators believe sparkling candles on champagne bottles caused the deadly New Year's Eve fire at a Swiss ski resort bar. The candles ignited ceiling material designed to reduce noise in the crowded venue. Authorities are examining whether the ceiling material met safety regulations and considering criminal prosecutions. News 7. Israel restricts aid group operations amid Gaza humanitarian crisis. More than 50 international NGOs warned that Israeli registration requirements threaten to halt operations in Gaza and the West Bank. 37 organizations received notices that their registrations would expire, requiring them to cease operations within 2 months. The groups said the measures violate international humanitarian law. News 8. Former Israeli PM accuses government of enabling settler violence. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert accused the current government of actively supporting what he called murderous settler violence in the occupied West Bank. Writing in Haaretz newspaper, Olmert said attacks against Palestinians were a coordinated campaign designed for ethnic cleansing. The criticism comes amid growing U.S. scrutiny of settler activities. News 9. Trump meets China envoy as Taiwan tensions persist. President Trump met with U.S. Ambassador to China David Perdue at Mar-a-Lago following a call with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The diplomatic engagements occurred as Taiwan concluded military drills amid deepening tensions between Japan and China. Washington recently approved its largest ever arms sale to Taiwan. News 10. Saudi forces strike UAE-backed groups in Yemen conflict. At least 29 fighters from the Southern Transitional Council were killed in Saudi airstrikes in Yemen's Hadramaut province. The attacks came as Saudi-backed forces launched operations to reclaim territory seized by UAE-supported separatists in December. The fighting exposes deteriorating relations between the two Gulf allies. News 11. Venezuela releases 88 people detained after disputed election. Venezuela's government announced the release of 88 people detained following the July 2024 presidential elections. The detentions occurred after Nicolas Maduro claimed victory in elections where he failed to provide corroborating evidence. Opposition groups have disputed the election results and called for transparency. News 12. Ecuador declares emergency after mass shooting in Manta. President Daniel Noboa declared a 60-day state of emergency across 9 provinces following a New Year's Eve shooting in Manta port city. At least 6 people died and 12 were wounded in the violent incident. Ecuador has struggled with increasing violence linked to drug trafficking organizations. News 13. African leaders call COP30 climate summit insufficient for frontline nations. Liberian observers criticize the COP30 climate summit in Brazil as another gathering of limited political courage despite lofty promises. African leaders highlighted the inadequate support for frontline women environmental defenders. The summit was described as a missed turning point for meaningful climate action. News 14. 8 Muslim nations demand Israel allow Gaza aid operations. Foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Indonesia, Turkey, Pakistan, Qatar and Egypt called for unrestricted humanitarian access to Gaza. The joint statement expressed deep concern over deteriorating conditions worsened by severe weather. The ministers demanded Israel lift constraints on essential supply distribution. News 15. Iran protests continue as currency crisis deepens. Mass protests in Iran entered their second week as the national currency collapsed under international sanctions pressure. $1 now equals more than 42,000 Iranian rials, making basic meals extremely expensive. Protesters have chanted against both economic conditions and the country's theocratic system. News 16. Gaza children die from cold as winter storms damage shelters. At least 3 children died from cold conditions in Gaza as winter storms and heavy rains flooded tent camps. More than 42,000 temporary shelters were damaged between December 10 to 17, affecting nearly 250,000 people. 17 others died when buildings collapsed due to strong winds and deteriorating infrastructure. News 17. Sudan conflict identified among top global crises for 2026. The International Crisis Group named Sudan's civil war among 10 conflicts requiring urgent attention in 2026. The Brussels-based organization called on President Trump to help end the conflict by first stopping UAE weapons exports. Sudan, Ethiopia, and Mali were highlighted as priority African conflicts after a violent 2025. News 18. U.S. intervention history in Latin America shows mixed results. Analysts noted that President Trump's pressure campaign against Venezuela continues a long history of U.S. intervention in Latin America. The approach dates back to the 1823 Monroe Doctrine and includes both successes and failures. Current tensions with Venezuela represent the latest chapter in this complex relationship. News 19. Saudi-UAE rift deepens over Yemen territorial disputes. The conflict between Saudi-backed forces and UAE-supported separatists has exposed deteriorating relations between the two Gulf allies. Both countries originally intervened in Yemen to oust Iranian-aligned rebels but now support opposing factions. The dispute extends to their different approaches toward Israel, Syria, and Sudan. News 20. Iran warns of regional chaos if U.S. intervenes in protests. Iranian security officials warned that U.S. military intervention in domestic protests would create chaos throughout the Middle East. Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani said such action would threaten American interests and soldiers in the region. Iranian armed forces remained on standby to reject external involvement. That's all for today's world news from KeyLang Daily News. Thank you for joining us for these 20 stories from around the globe. Stay informed, and we'll see you tomorrow.